And our topic today is a society based on truth. Um, we don't, we get so caught up in our day-to-day lives. We don't have a time to step back and say, what is the nature of the society that we're living in? Now, we should be doing that. That should be the principal question on everybody's mind. But we get so numb to that. We get so entertained from that. We get so um, um, disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from our society, and from the earth herself. We're so disconnected that we don't have a ready way of getting back to the connection. That's part of the job of Commonway. That's part of the job of this organization to stimulate those connections. I am not telling you what to believe, how to believe it, what to do, how to do it, etc. I'll roll that back. I'm suggesting some things that you should believe. I'm suggesting some things that you can do, etc. But there is not a sign here for the 10 steps that will get you such and such. Or loyalty oaths, or you've got to write my name in tattoo on your forehead. That would be interesting. But the thing that I want us to learn how to do is think and feel. And that thinking should be coming from right down here. It shouldn't be coming from up here with our educated brains, educated on all of the wrong things that we can be doing. So on our topic today, a society based on truth, my first thoughts around that were around the time of what was called the Velvet Revolution, the revolution that was in the Czech Republic, the former Czechoslovakia. Um, and I was impressed by the fact that they were saying they didn't just want to kick out the corrupt Soviet communist dominated government. They were saying, what we all know what we don't want. What do we want? And that is a very, very potent question. Uh, Many times we are so busy condemning the bad guys, we don't have time to we don't take the time to uh, ask the question, what is it that we do want? What is it that we are called to? What is the yearning in our hearts? What is the thing? Uh, what are our values? What are the things that make us stronger? What are the things that make me stronger? What's the point where you say, that's it, that's as far as I go, we're not going any further? Martin Luther King had to ask and answer that question when he was doing the civil rights demonstrations, and people were being beaten, people were being abused, arrested, etc. And he had to say, this is important. This is so important that it is worth my life. For most of you who know me, I did a lot of work in Sri Lanka, and someday we'll do a talk on Sri Lanka. Um, but there's a lot of sectarian violence in Sri Lanka at one time. And what would you do in the face of sectarian violence? That is not an idle question. We have our own form of 21st century sectarian violence. What will you do if you are confronted with that? So, Dr. Ariyaratne was out speaking somewhere, and people heard that he was sheltering Tamils who are the victims of the sectarian violence at that moment. And a mob came to the front door, and his eldest daughter, and I think she was like in her teens at the time, answered the door. She went to the door and she said, they were saying, "Give us the Tamils or we'll burn your house down." And she said, "I'm sorry, but my father's not here. He would tell you that you would have to kill him in order to get to the Tamils, that he would give up his life." And she said, "And my mother's not here because she'd tell you the same thing. You'd have to kill her. So I'm the only one here, so you'll just have to kill me." Now, that's a person who knows the value of their lives. That's a person who knows the value of um, uh, of what they are doing and what they're giving up. That's a person who knows what sacrifice means. Sacrifice is taking your pain and elevating it to the level of the sacred. And so our challenge is, how do we learn where our line is, the line that we draw in the sand and say, no, that's as far as we're going with this. Because most of us operate our lives from fear. Because most of us operate our lives as though we are afraid. We don't get to ask that question. We don't get to answer those questions. And therefore, we wind up sitting on this volcano of anger, frustration. We don't even understand what we're angry about. I was listening to a couple of guys talking angrily about Jeff Bezos and his wedding and his boat. And I wanted to say to them, why do you care what he spends his money on? What does it mean to you? Most people have the biggest wedding that they can afford. You could afford a bigger one than we have, okay? But that's not why they were talking about it. That's not why they were angry. They were angry for something that was lying deep inside of them that they couldn't even understand. I pulled up a quote today from one of my books, and just by saying that, I want to quote from another book, and I don't know if I can find the quote fast enough. And if I can't, I will try to do this from memory, which is getting more and more interesting every day. But this is a quote from Daniel Quinn in his book Ishmael, where he talks about a tiger in a cage in a zoo. And he says the tiger is walking the length of the cage. And it has a question that is burning in them. And as it's walking the length of the cage, the question is why? It just goes back and forth and it just says, why? Why? And he says, if you could stop the tiger and ask, why what? It couldn't answer you. It just knows that there is something fundamentally wrong. Now, I had my pacing the cage moment when I was about 11 years old. And this is the first time I started thinking about the society we were living in, as I was living in Camden, New Jersey. And oh, I have to always add the worst city in America. Um, and I could see how we were living. And then through the television, I could see how a lot of other people were living. And I started forming my own question. Why? Why are we doing this way? What are the values of a society when you have some people living these luxurious lives and other people who have not enough to eat, nowhere to sleep? They have no sense of dignity, no sense of purpose. I told y'all a while ago, I guess it was almost a year ago now, somebody spray painted, somebody tagged my car. Um, I go out and somebody scrawled some junk on my car. And no, it wasn't targeted. It was just where the car was. If I had parked a car back or a car forward, it'd have been somebody else's car that got spray painted. And I would ask that person, why? Why would you spend money to spray paint something on somebody else's car? What is the condition of your heart that says that's fun? What could you possibly derive from that? And these are questions that we should be asking as we are contemplating this new society we're creating by every step we take. The new society that we're creating by every action and every non-action that we take. I told a story before, and I'm going to tell it again. And this is when Václav Havel, a person who was very formative for me. Havel was known as a dissident who led the Velvet Revolution, who kicked the Soviet Union, the second largest superpower in the world, kicked them out of his society without firing a single shot. Now, just saying that, everybody, all people who love peace and transformation should study Havel, and nobody does. If I asked you to quote something by Havel, how many of you could? Okay. I've tried to do workshops on how the Velvet Revolution worked. Nobody comes. So maybe now in 2025, people will come. Maybe I'll do one of those for in the fall. Anyway, so Havel is imprisoned by the Soviet Union because he had the audacity to think for himself and to say what he actually believed. And so he's in this prison, and his job is pushing the laundry carts around. And he sees another guy that's in the prison, another political prisoner that he didn't know was there. And the way they were pushing their carts around, they had 10 minutes they could talk to each other before the guards would come and break them up. So when you're face to face with someone you haven't seen in a while, and you are about to talk to them for the first time in a while, what do you talk about? Well, if you're in this society, you know what you talk about. How evil the guards are, how unfair it is that you are in the prison, how angry you are, um, and how you can't do anything about it. You would talk about how bad the food is and how much you miss your wife and blah 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 blah. So for 10 minutes, they didn't do any of that. For 10 minutes, they talked about the nature of the society that they would create when they got out. So Havel got out, they dusted him off, put a suit on him, and made him the president. And the other guy, when he got out, they dusted him off, put a suit on him, and made him the foreign secretary. So how ready are we right now? I'm talking about the people who are on this call right now, and then the people who are going to be watching the video of this. How ready are we to make those kinds of decisions? How ready are we to take the leadership role in a society? My first book, Power of One, the subtitle, that you can see, is Authentic Leadership in Turbulent Times. These are the turbulent times. And we are the leaders. We are the authentic leaders. Now, what does authenticity mean in this case? What does being a leader in a society that is based in truth actually mean? Well, in that was my first book. In my last book, no, I shouldn't say last book, my most recent book, Birthing the Nation of Gaia, I put in here a section on universal values, the values of a universal spirituality. Now, I do a lot of talking when I'm in the gym, in the hot tub, because you have a really interesting audience there. People who are relaxing. And I was talking to this one guy, I'd seen him a lot in there. White guy, I'd say somewhere between the 70s and maybe 80s or so. Really nice guy. Um, and he always, when I say, how are you doing? He says, well, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, so I'm doing blessed, and I hope you are too. And I'm like, well, the one thing we agree on, yep, we're both blessed. Yep. And I asked him a question. I said, I've been around the world a number of times. I've talked to people a number of times going around the world. I've been on the opposite side of the planet. I've talked with people who have never even heard of Jesus, never even heard of Christianity. What happens to them? Yeah, does by default, does God just throw them away? It's like, I made a mistake. We'll just kind of wipe everybody off that part of the globe, and we'll have a better globe. And I could see on his face that he had not thought for 1 second about people who were different from him. And we had a good half-hour talk in the tub. I wasn't against stretching my time out there. Um, and I could, and several times as we're getting dressed, he comes back around and goes, "What about such and such?" And I said, "Yeah, what about such and such?" And so he was really working this notion for the first time of what he believed. So I put together in Birthing the Nation of Gaia a section on what I call values-based spirituality. And by spirituality, I do not mean religion. I'm talking about the things that I found that are in common in just about every religion. And I know you're about to say, what are those things? And I'm about to say, let me tell you. And I'm going to unfortunately tell you really quick. There's 10 of them, and each one of them we could talk about for several hours, and we're not going to right now. So, the 10 principles of universal spirituality. Um, in every wisdom tradition I've been able to find, there's a conversation on love, agape, or metta. And the way I translate that is, thou shalt love and be loved. Um, I'm just gonna, I have to say one word about this because no, I'm not because I don't have the time. One of the great things about doing this, I know I've got 3 minutes before a bunch of other people come in and want to do the catalyst meditation. So I have to stick to the script here. Number two, thou shalt be at peace. And I talk about that a lot in the book. Number three, thou shalt be of compassionate service. Number four, thou shalt forgive. Boy, is that one big. Number five, thou shalt be humble. Now, think about how many religions have that in their religion, but people don't practice it. Number six, thou shalt be inclusive. Number seven, thou shalt be authentic. And actually, there's a lot in a lot of religions on this notion of being true to a set of values and being true to your own internal guidance. Number eight, thou shalt be grateful. Number nine, thou shalt be responsible. And number 10, thou shalt awaken. Now, if we guide our lives that way, we'll live in a society that actually works for all living beings. If we don't live our lives that way, we'll be somewhere else, and and it won't be Mars. And I am betting on, I'm invested in, I'm all in on building a society of a world that works for all living beings.